The morning sun cast long
Let's
shadows
review the
across the
key
glass
points
towers
before
of
we
Manhattan
proceed.
as
Agreed,
Emma
let's
Carter
focus on the
pushed through the
essentials.
revolving doors of Sterling Industries. She adjusted her oversized glasses and pulled her cardigan tighter around her body, a habitual gesture that had become second nature over the past 4 years. The lobby buzzed with the usual morning energy, executives in designer suits rushing past, their phones pressed to their ears, their importance radiating from every purposeful stride. Emma moved through the crowd like a ghost, unnoticed and unremarkable. That was exactly how she wanted it. She had learned long ago that being invisible was a form of protection, a shield against the world that judged women by their faces before their minds. At 28, she had perfected the art of disappearing in plain sight. The elevator carried her to the 14th floor where the financial analysis department hummed with quiet concentration. Her desk sat in the corner, tucked away from the main pathways, surrounded by stacks of reports and 3 monitors displaying endless streams of data. Numbers had always made sense to Emma in ways that people never could. They were honest, predictable, logical. They never disappointed you or reduced you to your appearance. She settled into her chair and pulled up the merger analysis she had been working on for the past 3 weeks. Sterling Industries was considering acquiring a tech startup in Silicon Valley, and the numbers told a story that most people were missing. The startup looked promising on the surface, but Emma had dug deeper, tracing financial patterns that revealed significant risks hidden beneath layers of creative accounting. Her fingers flew across the keyboard as she compiled her findings into a report. She never signed her name to these documents, only her employee number. It was safer that way. Less attention, less scrutiny, less chance of someone looking too closely at who she was rather than what she had discovered. 30 floors above, Jackson Reed stood at the window of his corner office, surveying the city that had become his kingdom. At 35, he had transformed his father's modest investment firm into a billion-dollar empire. Sterling Industries now had its fingers in technology, real estate, renewable energy, and a dozen other sectors. Success had come easily to Jackson, perhaps too easily. Tall, commanding, with sharp features and eyes the color of steel, he was used to getting what he wanted. People bent to his will, competitors feared him, and women threw themselves at him with exhausting predictability. But lately, something had been bothering him. For the past 6 months, financial reports had been landing on his desk that were different from anything his team usually produced. They were brilliant, insightful, catching details that his highest-paid analysts missed. The writing was clear and direct, cutting through corporate jargon to reveal hard truths. And they were all submitted by employee number 4729. Jackson pressed the intercom on his desk. His assistant, Monica, responded immediately. She had worked for him for 7 years and knew better than to keep him waiting. "Get me the personnel file for employee 4729, he said without preamble. "Right away, Mr. Reed." 5 minutes later, Monica entered his office with a slim folder. Jackson took it and flipped it open, his eyes scanning the information. Emma Carter. Financial analyst. 4 years with the company. Bachelor's degree in economics from Columbia, master's in financial mathematics from MIT. Stellar performance reviews, though he noticed they were all submitted by her direct supervisor, never anyone from upper management. No photo in the file, which was unusual. "Where does she work?" he asked Monica. 14th floor, analysis department, northwest corner desk. "I want to meet her. Today." Monica's eyebrows rose slightly, but she knew better than to question him. "I'll arrange it." An hour later, Emma was startled by a call from her supervisor's office. Her heart hammered as she walked down the corridor. In 4 years, she had only been called to his office twice, both times for routine performance reviews. She knocked softly on the door. "Come in." Her supervisor, George Patterson, was a kind man in his 50s who had always treated Emma with respect. But today his expression was serious, almost worried. "Emma, take a seat. Mr. Reed wants to see you." The words hit Emma like a physical blow. Jackson Reed. The CEO. The man who occupied the 30th floor like a king in his castle. She had seen him exactly 3 times in 4 years, always from a distance, always surrounded by executives and assistants. Why would he want to see her? Do you know why? She managed to ask. George shook his head. Just that it's about your recent reports. Emma, your work is exceptional. I don't know what this is about, but you should be proud of what you've accomplished here. 20 minutes later, Emma found herself in an elevator climbing toward the executive floors, her hands clenched in her lap, her breathing shallow. She had dressed for invisibility as always, a loose gray blouse, black slacks that hung shapeless on her frame, hair pulled back in a severe bun, glasses that were slightly too large for her face. Comfortable shoes with no heel. No makeup, no jewelry, nothing that might draw attention. The elevator doors opened onto a world of polished marble and hushed luxury. Monica greeted her with a professional smile and led her down a corridor lined with abstract art worth more than Emma made in a year. They stopped at massive double doors. Mr. Reed is expecting you. Monica pushed open the doors, and Emma stepped into an office that seemed to occupy half the floor. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a view of the entire city. The furniture was sleek and modern, everything in shades of gray and chrome. And behind an enormous desk sat Jackson Reed. He looked up as she entered, and Emma felt his gaze sweep over her like a searchlight. She wanted to disappear, to sink into the floor, but she forced herself to stand straight and meet his eyes. "Miss Carter," Jackson said, rising from his chair. His voice was deep, commanding, the kind of voice that expected obedience. "Please, sit." Emma lowered herself into one of the chairs facing his desk, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Jackson studied her for a long moment. She was exactly as invisible as her file had suggested, almost aggressively plain. But her eyes, he noticed, were sharp and intelligent behind those oversized glasses. They held his gaze without flinching, which was rare. Most people looked away when he stared at them. "I've been reading your reports," he said, leaning back in his chair. "The analysis on the Harrison Tech acquisition. The risk assessment on the European expansion. The projection models for the renewable energy division. They're all yours, correct?" "Yes, sir." "They're exceptional. Better than anything my senior analysts produce, and I pay them 3 times what you make." Emma said nothing. She had learned that silence was often the best response. "Why haven't I seen your name on these reports? I prefer to let the work speak for itself." Jackson's eyes narrowed. "That's not how things work here, Miss Carter. Credit matters. Recognition matters. Why hide?" "Because credit and recognition come with attention," Emma said quietly. "And attention comes with judgment. I prefer to be judged on my work, not my appearance or gender or anything else." "And what makes you think you would be judged?" "Experience, Mr. Reed. For years of watching men with half my qualifications get promoted while I stay in my corner desk. For years of hearing colleagues dismissed as diversity hires or ambitious climbers based on how they look rather than what they know. I chose a different path." Jackson felt something shift inside him, a crack in his usual certainty. This woman was not what he had expected. There was steel beneath that plain exterior, a sharp intelligence that intrigued him more than any beautiful face ever had. "I have a proposition for you," he said, leaning forward. "The Harrison Tech merger is the biggest deal we've attempted this year. I want you on the primary team. Working directly with me. Your analysis suggests we should walk away from this deal, and I need to know if you're right." Emma's heart began to race. Working directly with Jackson Reed meant visibility, exposure, everything she had spent 4 years avoiding. But it also meant opportunity, the chance to do the work she loved at the highest level. "If I join this team, will I be judged fairly? Based on my work and nothing else?" Jackson held her gaze. "You have my word." It was a gamble, but Emma had not gotten where she was by playing it safe with numbers. Maybe it was time to take a different kind of risk. "Then I accept," she said. "Good. We start tomorrow. 8 a.m. And Miss Carter," he added as she stood to leave. "Thank you for being honest with me. It's refreshing." Emma nodded and turned toward the door. As she walked out, she did not see the way Jackson's eyes followed her, or the small smile that played at the corner of his mouth. For the first time in years, he was genuinely curious about someone. Not their connections, not their usefulness, but who they actually were beneath the surface. Emma took the elevator back down to the 14th floor, her mind spinning. She had just agreed to step out of the shadows, to work alongside the most powerful man in the company. Part of her was terrified. But another part, a part she had buried for too long, felt something she had almost forgotten. Hope.as she returned to her desk, Emma did not notice the way George Patterson watched her with concern, or how some of her colleagues glanced her way with new curiosity. The invisible woman had just been summoned to the top floor, and in the world of Sterling Industries, that meant everything was about to change. The next morning arrived too quickly. Emma stood in front of her closet at 6 a.m., staring at the rows of shapeless blouses and loose-fitting slacks that had become her uniform. For 4 years, these clothes had been her armor, protecting her from unwanted attention and allowing her to blend into the background. But today felt different. Today she would be working directly with Jackson Reed, sitting in meetings with senior executives, presenting her findings to people who had never noticed her before. She reached for her usual gray blouse, then hesitated. Her hand moved instead to a navy blue shirt she had bought years ago but never worn to the office. It was still modest, still professional, but it actually fit her properly. She paired it with tailored black pants and, after a moment of internal debate, added a simple silver necklace that had been her grandmother's. Small changes, barely noticeable, but they felt monumental. The executive conference room on the 29th floor was nothing like the spaces Emma was used to. A massive table of polished oak dominated the center, surrounded by leather chairs that probably cost more than her monthly rent. One entire wall was glass, offering a breathtaking view of the city waking up below. Emma arrived at 7:50, wanting to be early, to be prepared, to have a moment to settle her nerves before everyone else arrived, but Jackson was already there. He stood at the window with a cup of coffee, his suit jacket draped over a chair, sleeves rolled up to reveal strong forearms. He turned when he heard her enter, and something flickered across his face. Surprise, maybe, or was it interest? "Miss Carter. You're early. I like that I wanted to review the materials one more time before the meeting." Jackson gestured to the sideboard where coffee and pastries were laid out. "Help yourself. We have 15 minutes before the others arrive. Walk me through your concerns about Harrison Tech." Emma poured herself coffee and moved to the table, opening her laptop. For the next 15 minutes, she explained her analysis while Jackson listened with complete focus. She showed him the patterns she had found, the inconsistencies in Harrison Tech's financial statements, the red flags that suggested their valuation was artificially inflated. "You're saying they're lying about their user numbers," Jackson said, his voice sharp with anger. "Not lying exactly. More like using creative definitions to inflate their metrics. If you look at their active user count versus their actual revenue per user, the numbers don't match up. Either they're counting inactive accounts as active, or their monetization is far worse than they're claiming." How did our senior analysts miss this? Because they were looking at what Harrison Tech wanted them to see. "I looked at what the numbers were actually saying." Jackson stared at her for a long moment, and Emma felt heat creep up her neck under his intense gaze. There was something in his eyes she could not quite read, something that made her pulse quicken in a way that had nothing to do with nerves about the presentation. The door opened and the rest of the team began filing in. 6 senior executives, all men, all wearing suits that cost more than Emma made in a month. They looked at her with barely concealed surprise and, in some cases, dismissiveness. The invisible woman from the 14th floor, suddenly sitting at the table with the titans. "Gentlemen," Jackson said, his voice cutting through the low murmur of conversation. "This is Emma Carter. She'll be leading our analysis of the Harrison Tech acquisition. I expect you all to give her your full cooperation and respect." The emphasis he placed on that last word was not lost on anyone in the room. The meeting lasted 3 hours. Emma presented her findings with quiet confidence, fielding questions and challenges from executives who were used to being the smartest people in the room. Some were receptive, nodding thoughtfully as she explained her reasoning. Others were hostile, clearly resentful that a junior analyst was questioning a deal they had already championed. "This is speculation," said Marcus Webb, the chief financial officer, his tone condescending. "You're asking us to walk away from a $2 billion acquisition based on suspicions, not suspicions," Emma replied calmly. "Data analysis. And I'm not asking you to walk away. I'm asking you to negotiate from a position of accurate information. If Harrison Tech's valuation is inflated by 30%, as my analysis suggests, then we should adjust our offer accordingly." Jackson watched the exchange with interest. Emma never raised her voice, never showed anger or defensiveness. She simply presented facts, answered questions, and held her ground. By the end of the meeting, even Marcus Webb had stopped challenging her and started asking genuine questions about her methodology. When the executives filed out, Jackson stopped Emma as she was packing up her laptop. "That was impressive. You didn't back down. The numbers don't lie, Mr. Reed." "I just presented what they were saying, Jackson. When it's just us, call me Jackson." Emma looked up, startled by the informality, by the warmth in his voice that had not been there yesterday. "Okay. Jackson, have lunch with me. We need to discuss next steps, and I'd rather do it somewhere other than this building where every conversation gets reported to the board before it's even finished." Emma hesitated. Lunch alone with the CEO. It felt dangerous somehow, like stepping too close to a fire. But she was already committed to this path. Alright. An hour later, Emma found herself in a small Italian restaurant in a quiet neighborhood, far from the corporate towers of Midtown. Jackson had driven them himself, no chauffeur, no entourage. The restaurant was cozy and intimate, with checkered tablecloths and the smell of garlic and fresh bread filling the air. "I come here when I need to think," Jackson said as they settled into a corner booth. "No one from our world knows about it. The owner, Sophia, makes the best carbonara in New York and doesn't care who I am." "It's lovely," Emma said, and she meant it. There was something honest about this place, something real that she had not expected from a billionaire CEO. They ordered, and then Jackson leaned back, studying her with those steel gray eyes. "Tell me something, Emma. Why did you really choose to be invisible?" Emma took a sip of water, considering how much to reveal. "I went to Columbia as an undergraduate. I was 18, excited, ready to prove myself. I was also young and stupid enough to think that if I was smart and worked hard, that would be enough." What happened? A professor. Brilliant man, respected in his field. I took his advanced economics seminar, and I loved it. I wrote a paper that challenged one of his published theories. Instead of engaging with my argument, he called me to his office and spent an hour telling me how pretty I was, how I should focus on finding a husband rather than trying to compete with the men. When I rejected his advances, he failed me on the paper. Jackson's jaw tightened. "Did you report him?" I tried. The department chair suggested I had misunderstood, that perhaps I had dressed inappropriately and given the wrong impression. So I learned my lesson. I started dressing differently, acting differently. I made myself invisible so that my work would be visible instead. That's not right, Jackson said quietly. You should never have had to make that choice. Maybe not. But I made it, and it worked. I got into MIT for my master's, published 3 papers, graduated top of my class. All while being completely unremarkable in every way except my work. Their food arrived, and they ate in comfortable silence for a few minutes. Emma was surprised by how easy it felt to be with him, how natural the conversation flowed when they were away from the office and its hierarchies. "Can I ask you something personal?" Emma said, then wondered if she was being too bold. Jackson smiled. "Fair's fair. I just asked you something personal. Why did you really want me on this team? You could have just rejected the deal based on my report." Why bring me into the inner circle? Jackson set down his fork and looked at her directly. Because for the last 5 years, I've been surrounded by yes men. People who tell me what they think I want to hear, who are more interested in advancing their own careers than in telling me the truth. Your report was the first thing I'd read in months that felt honest. And when I met you yesterday, I saw someone who wasn't trying to impress me or use me or manipulate me. You just wanted to do good work. Do you know how rare that is in my world? I'm beginning to understand. Also, Jackson continued, his voice softer, there was something in your eyes. A kind of loneliness I recognized. Like you've spent so long protecting yourself that you've forgotten how to let anyone in. Emma felt her breath catch. He had seen through her so easily, past all her carefully constructed defenses. And I see the same thing in you, she said quietly. They locked eyes across the table, and something electric passed between them. Emma felt her heart racing, felt heat spreading through her body in a way that terrified and thrilled her. This was dangerous. This was exactly what she had been avoiding for 4 years. But she could not look away. The next 3 weeks passed in a blur of long hours and intense work. Emma and Jackson met almost daily, sometimes in conference rooms surrounded by the team, sometimes late at night in his office when the building was empty and quiet. They debated strategies, analyzed data, and slowly dismantled the carefully constructed facade that Harrison Tech had built around their true financial situation, but they also talked about other things. Jackson told her about the pressure of inheriting his father's company at 25, about the loneliness of being surrounded by people who only wanted something from you. Emma shared stories of growing up in a small town in Pennsylvania, the daughter of teachers who had sacrificed everything to send her to college. They discovered shared loves of old movies and obscure jazz and the kind of deep intellectual conversations that neither had enjoyed in years. Emma found herself changing in small ways. She started wearing clothes that actually fit her body. She let her hair down sometimes instead of always pulling it back. She even bought new glasses, frames that were stylish instead of deliberately unflattering. The changes were subtle, but Jackson noticed. She caught him watching her sometimes with an expression that made her pulse quicken. The annual Sterling Industries Gala was scheduled for a Friday night in late October. It was the company's biggest social event of the year, held in a ballroom at the Plaza Hotel, attended by everyone who mattered in New York business circles. Emma had never attended before. Junior analysts were not invited to such events. On the Monday before the gala, Jackson appeared at her desk on the 14th floor. Several of her colleagues stopped working to stare. The CEO rarely came down to the lower floors. Emma, I need you at the gala on Friday. As my guest, every head in the department turned toward them. Emma felt her face flush. I don't think that's appropriate. People will talk, people are already talking. Let them. I need you there because we're meeting with the Harrison Tech executives that night. Final negotiations before we make our decision. You've done all the analysis. You should be there for the endgame. It made sense professionally, but Emma knew there was more to it than that. She could see it in his eyes, in the way he stood just a little too close, in the slight smile that played at his lips. I don't have anything to wear to something like that. Then buy something. The company will reimburse you. Consider it a business expense. After he left, Emma's cubicle mate, Rachel, leaned over the partition. Girl, the CEO just personally invited you to the gala. Do you know what that means? It means I need to analyze a business deal, Emma said, but her voice lacked conviction. That night, Emma did something she had not done in years. She went shopping for something beautiful. She found herself in a boutique in Soho, staring at a dress that made her heart race. It was deep emerald green, the color of forests at twilight. Simple and elegant, with clean lines that would flatter her figure without being revealing. It was also terrifyingly expensive. The saleswoman saw her hesitation. Try it on at least. You never know until you see yourself in it. Emma stepped into the dressing room and slipped into the dress. When she looked in the mirror, she barely recognized herself. The woman looking back was not invisible. She was striking, confident, beautiful. Emma felt tears prick her eyes. This was who she had been hiding all these years. She bought the dress. Friday evening arrived with the weight of destiny. Emma stood in front of her bathroom mirror, applying makeup with hands that trembled slightly. She had watched tutorial videos, practiced techniques, tried to remember skills she had deliberately forgotten. When she finished, she looked at herself one final time. Her hair fell in soft waves around her shoulders. The dress hugged her curves perfectly. She looked like someone who belonged at a gala, someone who belonged next to Jackson Reed. The Plaza Hotel ballroom was transformed into something from a fairy tale. Crystal chandeliers cast dancing light across polished marble floors. Women in designer gowns mingled with men in tuxedos, champagne flowed freely, and a string quartet played classical music that floated through the air like something from another era. Emma stood at the entrance, suddenly terrified. This was a mistake. She should have stayed invisible. She should have stayed safe. Then she saw Jackson, and the rest of the room disappeared. He stood near the bar in a perfectly fitted tuxedo, talking with a group of executives. But his eyes were scanning the crowd, searching. When they found her, everything stopped. Jackson walked toward her slowly, his eyes never leaving hers. When he reached her, he did not speak for a long moment. He just looked at her like he was seeing something precious that might vanish if he moved too quickly. Emma, he finally said, his voice rough with emotion. You're breathtaking. It's just a dress, she said softly. No. It's you. Finally letting yourself be seen. He offered his arm, and she took it. Together they moved into the ballroom, and Emma felt the weight of hundreds of eyes turning toward them. The Invisible Woman and the CEO. It should have felt terrifying, but with Jackson's solid presence beside her, it felt like victory. They spent the evening moving through the crowd, talking with executives and investors and clients. Jackson never left her side, always introducing her as his colleague and advisor, making it clear that she was there on merit, not as decoration. Emma found herself enjoying the evening, engaging in conversations about markets and strategies, holding her own with people who had intimidated her from afar for years. Later in the evening, they met with the Harrison Tech executives in a private room off the main ballroom. The negotiations were tense. Armed with Emma's analysis, Jackson drove a hard bargain. The Harrison Tech CEO, a slick man in his 40s named David Morrison, kept trying to dismiss Emma's concerns. Your analyst is being overly cautious, David said with a condescending smile. These are normal fluctuations in the tech sector. Emma leaned forward, her voice calm and steady. Mr. Morrison, I have documented evidence that your company has been counting free trial users as active subscribers in your metrics. That's not a fluctuation. That's fraud. The room went silent. David's smile vanished. Jackson looked at Emma with something like pride in his eyes. We'll be adjusting our offer, Jackson said quietly. 30% reduction in valuation, or we walk away tonight. After 2 more hours of tense negotiation, they reached an agreement. Sterling Industries would acquire Harrison Tech, but at a price that reflected its true value, not its inflated projections. They had won, and it was Emma's analysis that had made the victory possible. When they finally returned to the ballroom, the party was winding down. Jackson led Emma to the terrace overlooking Central Park, where the cool night air was a relief after the heated negotiations. You were incredible in there, Jackson said. The way you stood up to Morrison. You saved this company millions of dollars tonight. I just presented the truth. Jackson turned to face her fully, and in the moonlight his eyes were dark and intense. Emma, I need to tell you something, and I need you to hear me completely. These past few weeks working with you have been the best of my professional life. But somewhere along the way, it stopped being just professional. Emma's heart hammered in her chest. Jackson, I know this is complicated. I know there are 1,000 reasons why this is a bad idea. You work for me, there are power dynamics, people will judge you unfairly. But I can't stop thinking about you. I can't stop wanting to know everything about you, to hear your thoughts on everything, to see you smile. You make me feel like the person I always wanted to be instead of the person I became out of obligation. Emma felt tears gathering in her eyes. For 4 years she had convinced herself that she was content with her invisible life, that she did not need connection or intimacy or love. But standing here with Jackson, feeling the intensity of his gaze, hearing the vulnerability in his voice, she realized she had been lying to herself. "I'm terrified," she whispered. "I spent so long protecting myself that I don't know how to stop. What if I let you see me, really see me, and I'm not enough? What if this is just because I look different tonight, and when I go back to being ordinary Emma, you'll lose interest?" Jackson reached out and gently cupped her face in his hands. "Emma, listen to me. I fell for you when you were wearing those awful oversized glasses and that shapeless gray blouse. I fell for you when you challenged me in my office, when you refused to back down in meetings, when you showed me what real integrity looks like. This dress is beautiful, but it's just wrapping. The gift was always you." Then he kissed her, soft and gentle at first, then deeper as Emma responded, her arms wrapping around his neck, her body pressing against his. It was her first kiss that meant something, her first kiss with someone who saw her completely and wanted her anyway. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Emma felt like she had been reborn. "I don't know how to do this," she admitted. "I don't know how to be in a relationship, especially with you." "Then we'll figure it out together," Jackson said. "No more hiding, Emma. Not from me, not from yourself, not from anyone. You deserve to be seen." And standing there on the terrace with the city spread out below them and the stars scattered across the sky above, Emma finally believed him. She had spent 4 years being invisible, but now she was ready to step into the light. The weekend after the gala felt like living in a dream. Jackson and Emma spent Saturday walking through Central Park, talking about everything and nothing, holding hands like teenagers. They had lunch at a small cafe in the village, went to a jazz club in Harlem, stayed up until 3 in the morning talking in Jackson's penthouse apartment. For the first time in years, Emma felt completely herself, no armor, no pretense, just her. But she knew the real test would come on Monday when they returned to the office. What would happen when their relationship became public knowledge? How would her colleagues react? Would everyone assume she had slept her way into Jackson's confidence? Monday morning arrived with dark clouds and the promise of rain. Emma dressed carefully in one of her new outfits, a charcoal gray suit that was professional but actually fit her properly. She wore her new glasses and let her hair down. Small changes, but they felt significant. The whispers started the moment she stepped off the elevator on the 14th floor. Emma could feel eyes following her as she walked to her desk. Rachel, her cubicle mate, greeted her with a sympathetic smile. "So it's true then. You and the CEO." Emma felt her stomach drop. "How does everyone know already?" "Honey, half the company was at that gala. The other half saw the photos that people posted on social media. You and Jackson Reed looking at each other like you're the only 2 people in the world. It's kind of hard to miss." Over the next few days, Emma felt the weight of judgment settling over her like a shroud. Some of her colleagues were supportive, happy for her. But others were hostile, whispering when she passed, making snide comments about career advancement and sleeping your way to the top. The worst part was that they were not entirely wrong. She had been promoted to senior strategic advisor, a position that came with a significant raise and an office on the 28th floor. She had earned it through her work on the Harrison Tech deal, but she knew that many people would never believe that. The executive team was split in their reactions. Some, like George Patterson, were genuinely happy for her and proud of her accomplishments. Others, particularly Marcus Webb, the CFO, were openly hostile. He started questioning her analyses in meetings, challenging her recommendations, making it clear that he viewed her as Jackson's pet project rather than a legitimate colleague. Jackson noticed, of course. He was protective, sometimes too protective. He shut down inappropriate comments in meetings, made it clear that Emma's position was based on merit, insisted that she be treated with respect. But his protection only reinforced the perception that she was there because of their relationship rather than her abilities. 3 weeks after the gala, everything came to a head. Emma was presenting a quarterly forecast to the board of directors, her first time addressing the full board. She had prepared meticulously, had reviewed her numbers a dozen times, knew her presentation was solid. But from the moment she started speaking, she could feel the skepticism in the room. "Miss Carter," interrupted one of the board members, a silver-haired man named Robert Thornton. "These projections seem rather pessimistic. Are you certain you're not being overly cautious?" "I'm being realistic based on current market indicators," Emma replied calmly. "The tech sector is showing signs of a correction. We need to be prepared for potential volatility." "Or perhaps," suggested another board member, a woman named Patricia Holmes, "you're simply not experienced enough to distinguish between normal fluctuations and genuine cause for concern. No offense, my dear, but you've been in this position for less than a month." The condescension in her voice made Emma's blood boil, but she kept her expression neutral. "My analysis is based on data, not experience. The numbers don't care how long I've held my current title." The meeting continued in the same vein, with Emma defending every point of her presentation against increasingly hostile questions. Jackson sat at the head of the table, his jaw tight with anger, but he said nothing. He had told Emma that she needed to fight her own battles, to prove herself on her own merits. But watching her being attacked made him want to leap to her defense. When the meeting finally ended, Emma gathered her materials with shaking hands. She had held her ground, had answered every question, but she felt battered and exhausted. As she headed for the door, Marcus Webb stopped her. "A word of advice, Miss Carter. If you can't handle the pressure up here, maybe you should go back to the 14th floor where you belong. This level is for people who earned their way up, not people who slept their way up." Emma felt something inside her snap. For weeks she had endured whispers and innuendo, had held her tongue and tried to prove herself through her work. But this was too much. She turned to face Marcus, and her voice was cold as ice. "Mr. Webb, I have a master's degree in financial mathematics from MIT. I graduated top of my class. I have published 3 papers in peer-reviewed journals. I saved this company millions of dollars on the Harrison Tech acquisition. My analysis of the European market expansion prevented what would have been a disastrous investment. I earned my position through 4 years of excellent work that no one bothered to notice because I deliberately made myself invisible. The only reason you're questioning my credentials now is because I'm dating the CEO and because I'm a woman. If I were a man with my qualifications, you would never dare speak to me this way." The conference room had gone silent. Everyone was staring at them. Jackson stood at the head of the table, his eyes dark with an emotion Emma could not quite read. Marcus's face turned red. "How dare you? How dare I tell the truth?" Emma's voice was quiet but fierce. "I'm done apologizing for my relationship with Jackson. I'm done pretending that I don't deserve to be here. I'm done letting men like you make me feel small so you can feel big. I quit." The words hung in the air like a thunderclap. Emma turned and walked out of the conference room, her head held high even as her heart shattered. She had finally found the courage to be visible, to be herself, and it had cost her everything. She made it to the elevator before Jackson caught up with her. He grabbed her arm, spinning her around to face him. "What the hell was that?" he demanded, and he looked furious. "That was me choosing my dignity over a job," Emma said, and she was surprised to find that she was not crying. "I will not work in a place where my accomplishments are constantly diminished because of who I'm dating. I will not be questioned and belittled and treated like I'm some kind of trophy you won instead of a professional who earned her place. I love you, Jackson, but I love myself too. And I deserve better than this." "You don't get to just quit," Jackson said, his voice rough. "You don't get to run away because things got hard. I'm not running away. I'm making a choice. There's a difference. Then choose me. Choose us. Fight for what we have." Emma looked at him, this man she had fallen in love with, this man who had helped her find the courage to step into the light. But she could also see the impossible situation they were in. As long as she worked for him, as long as she held a position in his company, people would question her legitimacy. Her accomplishments would always be viewed through the lens of their relationship. "I can't fight when the battle is rigged against me from the start," she said quietly. "Every success I have will be attributed to you. Every failure will be proof that I didn't deserve to be there. I can't win, Jackson. So I'm choosing to leave while I still have my integrity intact." She pressed the elevator button, and the doors opened immediately. Jackson followed her inside, and they rode down in tense silence. When they reached the lobby, Emma turned to face him one more time. "I love you," she said, and it was the first time she had said those words aloud. But love isn't always enough. Sometimes you have to love yourself more. Then she walked out of the building, out of Sterling Industries, out of the life she had been building for the past month. The rain that had been threatening all morning finally began to fall, matching the tears that finally spilled down her cheeks. Emma spent the rest of the day in her apartment, alternating between crying and wondering if she had just made the biggest mistake of her life. Her phone buzzed constantly with calls from Jackson, but she could not bring herself to answer. She needed time to think, to process, to figure out what came next. That evening, there was a knock on her door. Emma opened it to find Jackson standing in the hallway, soaked from the rain, his tie loosened and his hair disheveled. He looked like he had been through a war. "Can I come in?" he asked quietly. Emma stepped aside, and he entered her small apartment, water dripping onto her worn carpet. They stood facing each other, the air between them electric with tension and unspoken words. "I fired Marcus Webb," Jackson said abruptly. Emma's eyes widened. "What?" "After you left, I called an emergency board meeting. I told them exactly what you said to Marcus, and I told them that if they couldn't respect you, they couldn't respect me. Marcus refused to apologize, so I fired him. Effective immediately. Jackson, you can't fire a CFO because he insulted your girlfriend. I didn't fire him because he insulted my girlfriend. I fired him because he created a hostile work environment and diminished the contributions of a brilliant analyst for reasons that had nothing to do with her competence. The fact that you're my girlfriend is irrelevant to the fact that what he did was wrong." Emma sank onto her couch, overwhelmed. "You didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did." Jackson sat beside her, careful not to crowd her. "Emma, you were right about everything you said today. You do deserve better. You deserve to be valued for your mind, your skills, your integrity. And I've been failing you by not making that clear to everyone in the company. You've been defending me constantly. That's the problem. You shouldn't need defending. Your work should speak for itself. So I have a proposal, and I need you to hear me out before you say no." Emma looked at him warily. "What kind of proposal?" "Come back to Sterling Industries. But not as my employee. As an independent consultant. You would work with multiple departments, not just under me. You would have complete autonomy over which projects you take on. Your compensation would be tied to your results, not to your relationship with me. And most importantly, you would report directly to the board, not to me. We would have professional separation." Emma's mind raced. It was an elegant solution to an impossible problem. She could continue doing the work she loved, could prove her worth on her own terms, without the shadow of nepotism hanging over her. "But what about us?" she asked quietly. "How would we navigate a relationship if we're working in the same building but not together?" Very carefully, Jackson took her hand in his. "Emma, I want you in my life. Both in my professional life because you make me a better businessman, and in my personal life because you make me a better man. But I understand that those two things need boundaries. I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make this work, including accepting that at work, you're not mine. You're your own person, making your own decisions, building your own reputation." Emma felt tears gathering in her eyes again, but this time they were tears of hope rather than despair. You would really do that? Give up control? For you? Yes. Because the alternative is losing you completely, and that's not acceptable. Emma looked at this man who had seen her when she was invisible, who had loved her enough to let her go, who was now offering her a way to have both her career and her relationship on terms that honored her autonomy. It was more than she had dared to hope for. I have some conditions, she said. Name them. First, I want a contract that explicitly states my compensation and evaluation metrics. Everything documented, everything transparent. Second, I want to work with other companies too, not just Sterling Industries. I need to establish myself as an expert in my field, not just as someone who works for you. And third, Emma took a deep breath, when we're at work, we're colleagues. No special treatment, no public displays of affection, no indication that we're together. We keep our professional and personal lives completely separate. Jackson nodded slowly. Those are all reasonable conditions. I accept. Then I'll come back. But Jackson, if this doesn't work, if the situation becomes untenable again, I'm walking away. I love you, but I won't sacrifice my professional integrity for anyone. Not even you. I wouldn't respect you if you did, Jackson said softly. He reached out and cupped her face in his hands. Emma Carter, you are the bravest, most principled person I've ever met. I fell in love with an invisible woman who had the courage to step into the light. I will spend the rest of my life making sure that light never dims. Then he kissed her, deep and passionate, a kiss that promised forever. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Emma rested her forehead against his. We're really doing this, she whispered. We're really doing this, he confirmed. The next morning, Emma walked back into Sterling Industries not as an employee, but as an independent consultant. The announcement of her new role had been sent company-wide, along with an explanation of her qualifications and accomplishments. Jackson had also sent a memo making it clear that any form of discrimination or harassment based on gender, relationships, or personal circumstances would result in immediate termination. The reaction was mixed. Some people respected Emma's decision to establish independence. Others remained skeptical. But Emma discovered that she no longer cared about the skeptics. She knew her worth, knew her capabilities, and knew that she had the support of the person who mattered most. Over the next 6 months, Emma built a reputation as one of the most insightful financial analysts in New York. She consulted for Sterling Industries, but also for 3 other major corporations. Her analyses were sought after, her recommendations valued. She published a paper on market volatility that was cited by economists across the country. She had stopped being invisible not by changing her appearance, but by refusing to hide her brilliance. Her relationship with Jackson thrived under their new arrangement. At work they were professional, cordial, keeping appropriate distance. But in their private time, they were partners in every sense. They bought a brownstone in Brooklyn together, adopted a rescue dog named Winston, spent weekends cooking together and talking about everything from philosophy to their plans for the future. 1 year after the gala where everything had changed, Jackson took Emma back to the terrace overlooking Central Park. The spring air was warm and sweet, and the city glowed with evening light. Do you remember what you said to me here a year ago? Jackson asked. I said a lot of things that night, Emma replied with a smile. You said you were terrified of not being enough. Jackson took her hands in his. Emma, you are more than enough. You are everything. You challenged me to be better, to see clearly, to value substance over appearance. You showed me what real courage looks like. And I want to spend the rest of my life standing beside you as you change the world. He dropped to one knee, and Emma's breath caught as he pulled out a small velvet box. Emma Carter, will you marry me? Not because of what I can give you, not because of who I am, but simply because we make each other better, braver, more fully ourselves. Emma felt tears streaming down her face, but she was smiling wider than she ever had in her life. Yes, she said. Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes. When he slipped the ring on her finger, a simple platinum band with a single diamond that caught the light like a promise, Emma thought about the journey that had brought them here. She had spent so long being invisible, so afraid of being seen that she had almost missed the chance for real connection, real love, real life. But she had found the courage to step into the light. And in doing so, she had discovered that being seen, really seen, by someone who loved every part of you, was the greatest gift of all. As they stood on that terrace with the city spread out before them and their future stretching bright and unknown ahead, Emma finally understood what she had been searching for all along. Not invisibility, but authenticity. Not protection, but partnership. Not safety, but love in all its terrifying, beautiful complexity. She had chosen to be seen, and in that choice, she had found everything she never knew she needed.